Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth grade Math with Confidence training workshop. I'm Kate Snow, the author of Math with Confidence, and I'm just thrilled to be with you here today. We'll spend about an hour going through the program to make sure you're equipped for the year. And whether you're a veteran homeschooler who's used Math with Confidence ever since kindergarten, whether you're a brand new homeschooler who just bought it off of Amazon last week, I hope you get the information you need to get a great start to your year. So let's take a look and see what your child will be learning this year, or sorry, what you will be learning in this workshop. We'll start with the goals and philosophy of the program as a whole. Then I'll give you an overview of how the fifth grade level is structured. I'll teach you a little bit about what your child will learn and give you a quick refresher on multiplying fractions. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how to prep for the year. I'll address some common questions that parents often have about fifth grade. It's a new program this year, but I did pilot test it with about 150 families 2 years ago, so I know what kinds of questions tend to come up. And then last, there will be time for some Q&A. If you have your books already, I recommend having them nearby so that you can take a look as I'm describing parts of the program. And I also just wanted to introduce Donna Hunter. She's my assistant and a veteran homeschool mom, and also has pilot tested several of the upper levels of Math with Confidence. So she'll be helping me moderate the Q&A, and she'll be taking a look at and answering your questions as we go. All right, so first let's talk about the goals and philosophy of Math with Confidence. So Math with Confidence will be a kindergarten through sixth grade program when I complete it next year. Right now, kindergarten through fifth grade is out, and sixth grade will come out next summer. I'll talk a little bit more about sixth grade at the very end of the presentation. So as I've written the program over the years, I've had three main goals. First is to help children develop conceptual understanding of math, so that they understand the why of math, not just the how. That they see all of the different parts of math as one interrelated subject, not just a whole bunch of discrete or isolated procedures to memorize. And so they see those connections that help them remember and understand what they're learning. But beyond conceptual understanding, I also aim to help children gain proficiency with the fundamental skills they need to be successful in math. Conceptual understanding is great, but it's not the whole package. You also need to know how to actually solve problems to apply your math skills to the real world. And then third, I aim to help kids develop a positive attitude towards math. There's lots of games, conversation, real life applications, enrichment activities, lots of things spread out throughout Math with Confidence to help kids enjoy what they're learning. Um, Math isn't going to be every kid's favorite subject, but I sure hope that they approach it with a feeling of confidence, of enjoyment, and not a feeling of dread. So the philosophy of the program, this is more about how I accomplish those goals. So first of all, Math with Confidence focuses on one new concept at a time. Every lesson just adds a little bit more to the previous lesson so that the child's understanding of the concept is just growing gradually over time. There's no big leaps, there's no big steps. This helps avoid frustration and helps kids really understand what they're learning. It's sequential, so very logical, and then incremental with one little step at a time. And this is often called a mastery approach to new topics. And so just don't let that confuse you, though, that word mastery. It doesn't mean that kids need to have fully mastered every skill before moving on to the next. It just means that they are taking a look at one topic and really mastering their understanding of that topic in a kind of a logical and incremental way. Then, besides focusing on one new concept at a time, there's also daily practice and review. And this is more mixed up. It helps develop the skill proficiency that once children understand a topic, they get lots and lots of opportunities to practice it and review it. And there's ongoing review of core skills so that they really develop that proficiency. Getting fluent with any skill takes a lot of practice, and so spacing it out over the long term is what helps cement it in kids' memory. And this is called a spiral approach to review because kids return to sort of the same topic over and over, but more spread out. Just like like as a spiral, when it circles around, it returns to the same point, but more spaced out. So in terms of designing the program, I've designed it so it has thorough and rigorous coverage of grade level topics. In general, the content in each level is about equivalent to what's covered in US public schools. Now, this varies, of course. Every school doesn't teach the same thing. Different states have different standards. But in general, it's roughly equivalent to American public schools. When you compare Math with Confidence to other homeschool programs, it's generally considered about a middle of the road difficulty level. It's not the easiest program, but it's also not the most challenging. And a lot of that is because the learning is so doable, because each lesson builds so gradually on the previous one, and because the practice problems are meant to be doable. They're meant for kids to be able to solve with the strategies and techniques that their parent taught them in the lesson. They don't need to make huge mental leaps to be able to solve them. Um, and that's because math doesn't have to feel hard to be effective. And when programs are very challenging, for a lot of kids, it just means more frustration, not more learning. And all of this together helps kids feel confident in math and have a positive attitude towards it because they can do it. And it feels great to be able to learn new things and to be able to show what you know and to feel great in doing it. But just because Math with Confidence is a middle of the road difficulty level doesn't mean it has middle of the road results. And this is I wanted to share with you some results from the pilot test. So at the end of the pilot test year, about half the students took the California Achievement Test that spring. And the parents were quite delighted and surprised by how well their kids did. You can see that the grade level equivalent, the average and median grade level equivalent was about eighth grade, and 75% of the kids scored at the 98th percentile or the 99th. They just did absolutely great. And one mom even said to me that she was so shocked because every day had just been so easy and pleasant. It had never felt like a struggle, but then all of a sudden her kid scored at the 99th percentile on the standardized test. And, there's no guarantees. I cannot promise anything about standardized test results. This is a very small sample. But it was very reassuring to me, and I hope it's reassuring to you that Math with Confidence gives kids a strong foundation in math. Okay, so that was the program as a whole. Now let's take a look at the overview of fifth grade. So you'll need 3 books to teach fifth grade math with confidence. All of the instruction for you, all of the scripted lessons, the activities, the rules for the games, they're all in the instructor guide. And then your child will need 2 workbooks, Part A and Part B. Part A covers the first half of the year, Part B covers the second half of the year. And these are available as both printed books and as PDFs. There's 16 units with 6 to 13 lessons per unit. And the final lesson in each unit is like a review and assessment lesson. There's a unit wrap up, which I'll show you an example shortly. And then there's also an optional enrichment activity and a picture book suggestion. The pilot family spent about 30 to 45 minutes per lesson. It really depends on your kid. Some kids zoom through things, others need a little more time. It also, of course, depends on how many interruptions there are in your house and what else is going on a day. So in general, there are about 10 to 15 minutes of parent-led instruction and then 20 to 30 minutes of independent work per day. And so now I'll just kind of give you a quick tour to see what's inside the books. Each unit begins with a unit overview, and this is the overview of what your child will learn as well as the objectives. Then you get to the lesson list, which is just the list of the titles of lessons, give you a sense of where you're going in the unit, and then a list of any extra materials you'll need for the unit. On this next page, there's a little essay called Teaching Math with Confidence. And this is at the beginning of every unit. It gives you some teacher knowledge about what you are teaching your child. And especially as we get into fifth grade here, you might find that there are some topics that you have not thought about in quite a while, like multiplying fractions or dividing fractions. And so often I give a little explanation of those topics at the beginning of the unit just to help you reorient yourself and understand what you're teaching better. So then let's take a look at a lesson. Each lesson has the black and white pages are in the instructor guide. That's for you to read as you teach your child. And then each lesson has 3 colorful workbook pages for your child to complete. The lesson activities page, the practice page, and the review page. Now, this lesson activities page, well, I just said it's for your child to complete, but really it's for both of you to complete together. You can see that it has those 2 heads at the top, and that means it's for a parent and child to work on together. And it's meant to be used with the scripted lesson in the instructor guide. Um, and so here's just kind of a close-up of the instructor guide. Each lesson begins with a box that lists the purpose and materials for this lesson, as well as the memory work questions. Then there's a warm up. And if there's a letter in the warm up, that means it corresponds to a letter on the lesson activities page. So this is a lesson on comparing decimals to the thousandth place. And so the warm up starts with comparing whole numbers and comparing decimals with tenths and hundredths because kids are already familiar with that. And so the lesson, you can see that there's bold text. You can just open up the book, start reading the bold text, and that is the content of the lesson. Or you can change it to say it in your own words. Either way is fine. But if you just want something you can open and go, that's what you can do. Then part B, you can see activity B goes with part B there. And you'll see if you've used third or fourth grade that there's more printed text and a printed example on this page, which is different than third or fourth grade. So this is a new feature that I've included, and I'll talk more about it later in this workshop. Um, but I just want to emphasize now that the instructor guide is still an essential part of the program, and it guides your discussion of the text box. It helps you walk through the printed examples. It provides comprehension questions to make sure a child understanding what they're reading. And sometimes there's just details that would make the text box too long. Math gets a lot more complex and detailed as kids move into these upper elementary levels. And so I put the kind of the wrinkles, the little extra bits in the instructor guide. So again, you can just open that up and read it through to teach the text box to your child. I also just want to point out in the instructor guide, if you haven't used Math with Confidence before, you'll see that there's those gray rectangles, and notes in those gray rectangles are just extra notes. You don't have to read them, you don't read them to your child, and if you need to skip them on your first reading, that's perfectly fine. Okay, and then in this game, there's an activity C, which is Dice Decimal War, a two-player game that use some dice to compare decimals. And so that part you do with your child, and then you get to the final bit, independent practice and review. And this refers to the 2 pages in the lesson that your child will complete on their own. You can see those both have one head at the top, just to remind them that this is for independent work. The practice page always provides practice of the skill that you just taught your child. And then the review page is that spiral review that reviews a whole bunch of different skills. So in this, for example, in this review page, your child practices identifying angles, some mental addition, some rounding, and then writing lengths with a decimal point, lengths in centimeters with a decimal point. So a little bit of different things to provide some variety, but also keep all those skills alive. At the end of each unit is the optional enrichment lesson. So the optional enrichment lesson includes a suggestion for a math picture book as well as an enrichment activity. And you can skip the enrichment activity and picture book if you'd like or if you don't have time for it. And this year, I've recommended that you use this book, How Many Guinea Pigs Can Fit on a Plane, as your supplemental picture book throughout the whole year. It's about 120 pages long, and so each enrichment lesson suggests a few pages to read from it. In younger levels of Math with Confidence, I included a separate picture book for each enrichment lesson, and there just weren't enough good ones for fifth and sixth grade for fifth and sixth grade content. And this book is really, really cute. It uses a lot of multiplication and division to estimate kind of answers to crazy questions that were submitted by kids. And so it's really fun to follow the author's thought process and see how many guinea pigs fit on a plane, amongst other questions. But like I said, you can also just skip that and not do it, and your child will still get a great math education this year. The enrichment lesson also includes a 2-page unit wrap-up, and I do recommend that your child complete these even if you skip the enrichment activity and picture book. And they help consolidate learning. They help your child see, wow, I learned a lot in this unit. And they're always 2 pages. There's no review page for this last unit wrap-up lesson in each unit. And if you live in a state where you need to provide evidence of learning or where you need to create a portfolio for a homeschool evaluator or for a charter school, these are a great thing to save. If you save the unit wrap-ups throughout the year, you'll have a really nice portfolio to show all the things your child learned in math this year. And then lastly, this is a new feature in fifth grade Math with Confidence. At the very back of each workbook, you will find the unit reference pages. And these are all of the teaching boxes throughout the whole workbook summarized and put into just a few pages. And I've included them there so that as your child is doing the review pages, if they can't remember how to do something, they can go to those unit reference pages at the back of the workbook and refresh themselves by reading the text and looking at the example. You'll find them at the back of both Workbook A and Workbook B. So after your child works through Workbook A this year, make sure you hold on to it so that she can look back at the unit reference pages as she moves into Workbook B. Or you can tear them out, they're perforated, and you can stick them like in a binder or in page protectors or something like that. So next, let's talk about what your child will learn in fifth grade math. So in kindergarten through fourth grade, the main focus was on your child getting to know whole numbers very well: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Now in fifth grade and then moving forward into sixth grade next year, your child will still do some kind of final wrap up with those whole numbers, but now the emphasis really shifts to fractions and to decimals. And so there will be some review of multi-digit multiplication and long division. Your child will extend place value to the billions place, but there's a lot of fractions and decimals. Your child will learn how to add, subtract, and multiply fractions and mixed numbers with different denominators. You'll do a gentle introduction to fraction division this year and then follow up with more of that in sixth grade. Your child will learn how to add and subtract decimals to the thousandths place. And your child will also learn how to multiply and divide decimals by whole numbers. Next year in sixth grade, your child will learn how to multiply and divide decimals by decimals. In addition to all these fraction and decimal skills, your child will also learn how to find the volume of rectangular prisms. She'll explore the side and angle properties of triangles and quadrilaterals. She'll learn about line graphs and the coordinate plane. And then she'll do a little bit of work with data as she learns to find the mean and median. And like I said, fractions and decimals are a huge part of this year. And one of the big new topics is multiplying fractions. So I'm just going to here give you just kind of a 5-minute refresher on multiplying fractions. So you might remember the steps for multiplying fractions. What you do is you multiply the numerators, that's the top numbers, you multiply the denominators, the bottom numbers, and then you simplify if needed. So to solve 1/2 times 3/4, you multiply 1 times 3, that equals 3, and 2 times 4, that equals 8. So 1/2 times 3/4 equals 3/8. Okay, that's really easy, right? But that's just the process. We can teach that in a day to a kid, but to teach them what it actually means and how they'd actually apply this method to real life is a whole different story. So let's look at what this actually means and get that, make sure that you have that conceptual understanding of fraction multiplication before you teach it to your kid. So to understand fraction multiplication, you first have to understand something very important about fractions, is that we can think of them in two ways. We can think of them as numbers or as operators. And so up until now, your child mostly thought of fractions as a quantity or as a number, like a number on the number line, or an amount of stuff, an amount of pie, an amount of pounds of chocolate, that kind of a thing. But this year, your child will start to think of fractions as operators. And by operators, I just mean that they operate, they do stuff to other numbers. So in Unit 8, your child will find fractions of sets. So for example, to find 1/2 of 12, we divide the set into two parts and take one of them, right? 1/2 of 12 is 6. And 1/2 there, 12 is the quantity, the amount of stuff. And then 1/2 is the operator that acts on the 12. And this introduces the idea that a fraction can act on another number and split it into fractional parts. So when we multiply fractions, that's really what we're doing. We're using one fraction as an operator and another fraction as a number. And the first fraction is operating on the number, on the second fraction. So you'll see this in Unit 10, where your child uses fractions as operators as he multiplies fractions by fractions. So let's take 1/2 times 3/4 again. To visualize 1/2 times 3/4, we can think of it as what's 1/2 of 3/4. That multiply means of in this situation. Or to make it even more concrete, we can think I have 3/4 of a cake left over. If I eat half of the leftovers, what fraction of the whole cake did I eat? And so in this situation, 3/4 is the quantity, it's the number, and 1/2 is the operator that operates on the quantity and takes a fraction of it. So to build conceptual understanding, you and your child will talk through fraction problems like these before you get to that process and teach your child how to just kind of multiply across to find answers. So we want to find half of 3/4. So we start by identifying how much do we have? What's the number? 3/4. Okay, we want to find 1/2 of 3/4. So we split the 3/4 into halves. This is that splitting up the quantity according to our fractional parts. Now I want one of the halves. So I take one of those halves. Oops, sorry. There we go. And that's the amount that I shaded. If I take half of the 3/4, I get 3/8 of the original cake. And so 1/2 times 3/4 equals 3/8. And the visual helps explain why that's the correct answer. And so I know this has been a super fast introduction to multiplying fractions. Don't worry if it felt fast. A lot of mathematical concepts like this, and including this one, are explained in the Teaching Math with Confidence in the unit overviews. So make sure to look there as you get to do concepts or ones that you don't quite, maybe you don't quite remember or never learned the conceptual basis for them. And then also just remember all the lessons are scripted and there's examples printed in the lessons in those text boxes. So if you don't quite remember something, you've got a lot of tools right there to help explain it to your child. Okay, so after that quick tour through the what your child will learn, now we'll get into how to prep for the year. And I'm going to send you this list after the presentation, so it will be in your inbox by the end of tomorrow. So don't worry about taking notes on it. So first of all, read the introduction. I put lots of information in the introduction, including tips on scheduling, on how to develop independence in math, what you'll need, common questions. And so make sure you take a look at that now. And then as you have questions as you teach this year, go back to it because often you might find that the answer is right there. Second, make your math kit. You'll use a lot of manipulatives throughout fifth grade math with confidence, and it's very important that kids can use those hands-on concrete ways of representing numbers, especially all these fractions that they'll be doing this year. And so here's what you'll need in your fifth grade math kit. It's very similar to what you used in fourth grade with just a couple new things. Okay, so hold on, I gotta make sure I can see myself so I can know what I'm showing you. Okay, so I like to keep all my Math with Confidence manipulatives just in one of these plastic shoe boxes. They can get them for a couple dollars at Target. I like to keep things simple. I also like to use Ziplocs, these ones that just kind of go across like this because they are just easier to open and close. It makes cleanup easier. And I definitely recommend the freezer bags because they're a little bit tougher. Okay, so for fifth grade, you'll need 30 small counters in two different colors because you'll often use them as game pieces on game boards. You'll need base 10 blocks. Base 10 blocks, I keep them in a separate shoebox because they do take up some room. Base 10 blocks are these wonderful blocks. They're great for showing place value. And then this year we'll use them even for decimal place value. So in third and fourth grade, you generally thought of there was this one teeny little block that counts for 1, then a rod of 10 that is a 10, a flat that is 100, and then a big cube that is 1,000. Well, this year we'll actually use them, we'll pretend to zoom in on the base 10 blocks. So if you take this one little cube and imagine zooming in on it, we'll zoom in on it to see a 10 by 10 square, and then we'll use this to represent one whole and find decimal parts of it. So you'll use them for both whole numbers and for decimals. Okay, so beyond counters and base 10 blocks, you also need a couple manipulatives for fractions. One is fraction circles. These are fractional pieces that come together to make a whole circle. They're great for showing especially division of fractions. If you use third grade math with confidence, you probably already have a set of these, so just grab them from there. We'll also use fraction bars. And this is the one new fraction manipulative that you'll need this year. These are like rods there's one large rod that is one whole, and then the other pieces are fractions of it. These are really great for showing addition and subtraction of fractions with different denominators, so you use them for that. You'll also need a bit of play money. You'll need 21s, 10s, and 100s for some of the last place value work that you'll be doing with your child. You'll need just a plain old 1-foot ruler marked in inches and centimeters, a protractor for a little review of measuring angles, 2 packs of cards and 2 dice because there will be lots of games, You'll need a highlighter or like a colored pencil or light colored marker. You'll use a highlighter to teach your child to highlight important information. And it's just an important math study skill, so good to have one handy. And then you'll also need a dry erase marker and a page protector. You'll put one of the Blackline Masters in a page protector, but I recommend putting even more in page protectors. So I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so you'll put all those things in your math kit. I'm just going to clear mine out of the way for me for a second. And then the next step is to copy or print the essential Blackline Masters and put them in a binder. So all of the Blackline Masters are available in the back of the book, at back of your instructor guide, or you can download them at welltrainedmind.com/MWC if you'd rather not cut up your book or have to photocopy out of it. And I recommend taking them, putting them in page protectors in a binder because it makes it so much easier to keep them neat and organized and makes it so much easier to keep track of them. Especially if you're using multiple levels of math confidence, this can be really helpful. So you can see in my binder here, I have all the levels, kindergarten through fifth grade. And so I use a divider to divide them by grade level. And then for the fifth grade Blackline Masters, I just have them here. I'll just kind of, I know they're a little plasticky, a little hard to see here. This gives you a sense of what is in them. And you'll notice that there are some that need to be cut apart, like for example, for decimal cards, there's fraction cards. There's also a few things that you'll use for geometry. I recommend not doing that until you get to those lessons. Things have a tendency to wander away or get crumpled or lost when they're cut up. And so I like to just leave them in a page protector until I need them and then cut them up the day of the lesson. Then after you do cut them up, I recommend keeping them right in that page protector so that you don't lose any of those little bits of pieces and little scraps of paper. There's also a list in right before the Blackline Masters in the instructor guide that kind of tells you whether like which ones you'll use multiple times over the course of the year and which ones you'll just like use for a day and then move on. There's several geometry Blackline Masters that you just use for a day or two and then you can toss them. Okay, and then fourth, this is a great time of the year to find the answer keys and the helpful resources in the back of the book and online. So you'll definitely want answer keys this year. There's a lot of math in fifth grade, and it's not all things we can do in our heads really quickly. Look for the answer key to each unit at the end of each unit in the instructor guide. At the back of the book, you'll also find the scope and sequence. This is very helpful if you need to share what your child is learning, for example, the homeschool evaluator or a charter school. There's a list of all the memory work your child will learn. You'll find it in two different forms. There's this list, and then there's also a visual, and you can use either way to quiz your child on the memory work. There's also a full materials list at the back of the book. One side has what you'll need in your math kit. That's the top of one side. And the rest is just other supplies that are used throughout the year. And all of the ones that are marked with stars are used in the enrichment lessons. So you can see there's very few things that you need for regular lessons, and they're often things like scissors or three paper half circles. So usually not anything that you need to gather up ahead of time. You can just usually grab it right before the lesson. Another helpful resource is the Well Trained Mind, my publisher's website at welltrainedmind.com/MWC. You can find both the instructor sample and student sample if you haven't had a chance to buy your books yet and want to see what's inside. And then this is also where you can download the Blackline Masters so that you can just print them out and not have to worry about copying them or cutting them out. And then another helpful resource I wanted to let everybody know about is the Math with Confidence Facebook community. This is just a fabulous group of parents who are using Math with Confidence and just talking about math, sharing their wins, sharing their successes, asking questions, asking for help. I just love how positive and supportive this community is. And if you have any questions that you run into as a parent using the program, it's a great place to ask them. Even if you don't use Facebook for much else, the groups are a really great feature, and the Math with Confidence community is a really lovely place. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some common questions that people often ask about Math with Confidence in general, and that Pilot family specifically had about fifth grade Math with Confidence. So first of all, how do I know which level to use? And for this, I highly recommend that you read the placement advice in the sample. If you're pulling your child out of public school or if you're coming from another program, it's really important, no matter what curriculum you use, to take a look at that placement advice. Because if you put your child in too easy a program, they'll be bored out of their mind. And if you put them in too hard of a program, they'll be frustrated and you will be frustrated. In general, aim for that Goldilocks challenge level. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. Because, just keep in mind what you're trying to do. You want your child to end the year feeling confident and positive about math. You want to really develop these foundational skills. And so if you push your kid too quickly into a level that's too hard for them, they'll have a shaky foundation and won't be able to really gain everything they need out of that new level. And on the other hand, if it's too easy, they'll just feel bored and kind of sick of math by the end of the year and won't have learned as much as they could. So there's more detail in the introduction, but these are the really essential skills for starting fifth grade math with confidence. Kids should be able to, before they start, they should be able to add, subtract, and understand place value in numbers to the millions. They should have general fluency with the multiplication division facts, and I'll talk more about that in a second. They should be able to multiply two-digit numbers by two-digit numbers with the traditional written process by stacking the numbers on top of them, each other, and then multiplying them out. They should be able to solve long division problems up to 4 digits divided by 1 digit. And they should be able to find equivalent fractions by either multiplying or dividing and convert mixed numbers to improper fractions and vice versa. These are really essential skills for kids to know before they start fifth grade. They'll be reviewed. So it's okay if your child's a little rusty after the summer, but they should have learned them last year, had a pretty good grasp of them. So what if my child isn't fluent with the multiplication facts yet? So what I recommend you do is you teach Unit 1 and then look at the Unit 1 checkpoint at the end of the unit. This checkpoint at the end of each unit tells you what kids usually can do at this point in the year and what skills they need before they can move on to the next unit. And generally you'll find that kids don't have to have mastered every skill, but they just need to have kind of understood the general concepts of the unit before moving on. The Unit 1 checkpoint in fifth grade gives you really a detailed plan for evaluating how well your child's doing with the multiplication facts and figuring out what to do. It will point you towards a Blackline Master at the back of the book that has an assessment for the multiplication facts, as well as some practice games. It will help you evaluate, well, does my child just need to get a little faster? Or is there just like a few of those tricky sevens and eights that they still have to really get down? Um, or do they, really need a lot of help with the multiplication facts? In general, in fifth grade, if your child is ready for fifth grade content, is understanding has all those other prerequisite skills, but is just shaky on the multiplication facts, I recommend continuing through with fifth grade and just letting your child use the multiplication chart, which is in the back of the book. Let your child use that multiplication chart as they're moving through. Because that will allow them to learn the procedures for these more difficult skills like dividing for long division with two-digit numbers or more complex multi-digit multiplication problems. It'll let them keep moving forward and not be stuck because they aren't as fast with the multiplication facts as you might like. However, if your child really does not have a very good grasp of multiplication division, that's a clear sign that either you need to do some remedial work before starting fifth grade, or your child might be better suited to the fourth grade program. And people sometimes ask about the multiplication facts. How do the multiplication division facts that stick books fit into the program? These are the books that I wrote before I wrote Math with Confidence, and they're meant as a supplementary program for learning the multiplication and division facts and getting more practice with them. If your child has used Math with Confidence all along, he likely doesn't need these books. And sometimes people use them in the summer, for example, before starting fifth grade to just do a refresher. And so they're typically not needed. However, if your child is starting fifth grade and doesn't really know the multiplication facts well at all, maybe he's coming from a different program, multiplication facts that stick would be a good way to start the year to get some practice before diving into the full program. So I'd recommend in that case either stopping and doing math facts that stick for the first month or two of the year or adding it in as a little extra practice throughout the day. And the one other thing I want to say about the multiplication chart is that people sometimes feel like it's a cop-out to let their kid use the multiplication chart. But if you've worked and worked on the multiplication facts throughout third and fourth grade and your child doesn't have them down, you just don't want that to hold them back. And it's really okay. And in the pilot test, I would say it was about maybe 10% of the pilot test kids at the beginning of fifth grade, even though they'd worked on the multiplication division facts, weren't quite fluent enough with them. And a lot of those families reported that after their child used the multiplication chart for just a few more months, all of a sudden those hard facts really started to click. And whether it was seeing those visual patterns in the chart, whether it was just their brains needed more time to develop, whether they needed more practice, something about it really worked. So I do recommend it. That make sure you've given it a good try to really learn them. But if you have, it's fine to use the chart as a tool during the fifth grade year. Okay, so another set of questions that pilot testers often had was about this new format in the workbook where there's more text, there's more printed words, and there's more printed examples. So one question they often had was, do I really need to use the instructor guide? Aren't the text boxes in the workbook enough? And my answer is really no. The instructor guide includes a lot more than is in the student workbook. It has discussion questions. It has important details that I couldn't fit in the student workbook. And there's also lots of checks for understanding. It's very easy when you're reading math, just kind of let it go right over your head. And so slowing a child down and making sure they really understand what they're reading is important. And that's included in the instructor guide. And also just keep in mind that there's no directions in the workbook for the lesson activities pages. The practice and review have full directions so that your child can do those independently. But the lesson activities page doesn't have directions for the warm-ups, the games, a lot of the real life applications. And so you need that instructor guide to know how to do all those activities. Now, the text boxes, most families really liked them once they got used to them, but for some kids at the beginning of the year, it felt like a big change and could be a little overwhelming to have all of these math words on their page suddenly. And so if your child feels a little overwhelmed by all the text in the workbook, the first step is to really teach your child how to read math. And most fifth graders can probably read pretty fluently at this point. If your child can't read fluently, that's fine. It's fine for you to read the boxes aloud to your child. But even kids who are good readers will need some explicit instruction in how to read math at the beginning of the year. This is included in the first few lessons, and it's also discussed in the Teaching Math with Confidence in the unit overview of fifth grade or for Unit 1. But what's important to keep in mind is that reading math is just so different than reading a narrative text. If your child's used to reading stories, you can kind of read fast, you don't have to get every detail, and you'll still understand what's going on and can enjoy a story. Math is short, but it is packed with meaning, and every word really matters. So at the beginning of the year, it might take you a little extra time to read the text boxes, and you'll want to model for your child reading slowly, understanding every word and thinking about what those vocabulary words mean. I'm checking for understanding, reading through and then thinking, do I understand what's happening? And also emphasize to your child that it's okay to reread. Sometimes in math, you have to read things a couple times to really understand what's going on, and that's okay. And by teaching your child how to read math now, you're really making an investment for the future, for them to develop greater independence down the road. And then even with that explicit reading instruction, some kids might need just a little bit more support in not feeling overwhelmed. And so one thing that's really helpful is to just use a blank piece of blank paper, just cover the rest of the page so your child can focus just on the text box. Or if that's really not working for your child, if looking at one whole printed example is a little too much, it's fine for you to write out the example step by step on separate paper or a whiteboard. It might take a little bit longer, so it's up to you to decide whether that's worth it. But for some kids, that can be really helpful, especially at the beginning of the year where they're still getting used to this format. Now, on the other hand, some kids get a little annoyed when the parent says, no, no, we're really going to read this and talk about these examples. Some kids look at it and like, I get it. I totally understand. And maybe that's true. But as the parent, don't take your kid's word for it. This is a great time to probe a little deeper. And one way to do that without getting into a fight about it is to ask your child to be the teacher and teach the concept to you using the information in the text box. When your child has to explain it to you, they have to really think about it. And if you listen carefully, you'll be able to see what they get and what they don't get. And then once your child does that, if they understand everything in the text box, great. Just make sure you check the instructor guide to see if there are additional teaching points, some of those details that weren't listed, or questions to ask to check for understanding. Kids are at such different levels of development in these upper elementary years. Some kids are really still like little kids, and some kids are moving towards puberty and becoming middle schoolers. And so it's normal for kids to be at a whole range here in fifth and sixth grade, both for them to want to feel more grown up and to sometimes feel a little overwhelmed by the kind of what they're moving towards. In the same way, some kids who are feeling a little more grown up sometimes don't want to play games anymore. This can be a little sad if you like playing games and hanging out with your kid, but it's a way of just them asserting some independence. They might feel it's a little babyish. And if that's the case, it's okay not to play the games in math with confidence. A lot of families find them the best part. But if your child's fighting you on it, that's okay. Take a look at the game and use the format of the game to just come up with a few related practice problems. Have your child solve those to prove that they know what they're doing, and then let them move on to practice. You'll also find in fifth grade that there are a mix of two-player and one-player games. So there are some games that they're more like puzzles where your child has a challenge to figure out. And so the directions will be in your instructor guide, but then after your child understands the directions, they can just go and do the one-player game by themselves and then move into their practice page. And then another thing that I heard often in the pilot test was asking, so can we make math a little bit more independent here in fifth grade? And I totally get this. I know many of you have many kids that you are teaching math to. You have household responsibilities. Many of you work as well. There's a lot to juggle here. And so I can understand the desire for kids to be more independent in math, especially as they move towards fifth grade and start getting a little bit more resistant. But the thing is that fifth graders really are not ready to learn math independently. Math only gets harder from here on out. It does not get easier. And kids of all ages need just accountability, they need support, they need encouragement, they need all these things in their math instruction. And if you think back to your own math education, think about yourself at different ages. Like, think about were there really any grades where you just could have been given a textbook and told to go read it and learn it on your own? Even with video lessons, most kids really need somebody to ask questions. They need somebody to be checking their work and checking that they understand what they're learning. And so, certainly at the fifth grade level, I really recommend that you stay plugged into what your child is learning. But with that said, I did really take what the pilot tester said seriously, and that really accounts for some of the changes you see at this level. They reported that having the text boxes on the workbook page really helped speed things along once they and their kids got into the swing of it and got into the rhythm of it. And it really made things easier over the course of the year. And then as they moved into sixth grade, that just got more and more so. So what I recommend for fifth grade, make sure you are still involved, you are teaching those lessons. And then instead of focusing on independence with the lesson activities page, focus on independence with the practice and review pages, because that can save you quite a bit of time too. Teach your child at the beginning of the year these kinds of skills. So there's the lesson activities pages have the printed examples. So teach your child that if they get stuck in the practice page, look back at that page, turn the page back, look at the printed example and use that to figure out what to do. And then if your child's stuck on a review question, have them use the unit reference pages at the back of the workbook. Look through there for a relevant example and use that to figure it out. I also recommend that if your child tries using those resources and still can't figure out a question, that you teach your child to just write a little question mark next to the problem or put a sticky note on it and keep going with the rest of the page. Often, once kids have gone through and done the rest of the page, when they come back to it, they realize they actually do know how to solve a problem. And this prevents them from interrupting you in whatever you're doing. And that really helps to keep all your other things going on. If you're working with your third grader in math, it will go much more smoothly if your fifth grader is not constantly interrupting you. So teaching your kids not to interrupt you when you're working one-on-one with a sibling can make your whole day go more smoother and make everybody feel a little less frazzled. And then one other way that you can encourage independence in fifth grade is to allow your child to check their own work. This depends on your kid. You know your kids best. But if you put a sticky note on the right answer key in the instructor guide and give your child a colored pen and tell them to check their own work, they can do that. And they can even, if sometimes they might even be able to figure out what they did wrong by looking at the answer key. So in that case, I definitely recommend taking a look at it yourself afterward and talking about any places where things went wrong. But that can be a big time saver too as you move forward. Then, related to this, is a question I hear often. I have multiple kids. How can I get all the math lessons in? And a lot of subjects can be multi-age, but not math. Kids really do need math lessons that are geared towards their proficiency level. And so, first of all, I recommend, combining whatever subjects you can, science, social studies, and then to prioritize individual reading, writing, and math where it's needed, because they're all subjects where the investment that you make of time right now pays really huge dividends, both in your kids' academic success and in their ability to learn independently as they move into middle school and high school. But at the same time, there are a few things you can do that will just help keep those math lessons moving along. So, keeping your supplies and black lines organized is huge. Just having one math kit with everybody's math manipulatives in it can make a big difference. And having all your black line masters organized in a binder just means that you don't waste any time looking for them. A great way to save time on games is to have your older children play games with your younger kids, or skip games and do a few practice problems instead. Teach your kids to mark those tricky questions and keep working rather than interrupting you. And it's fine to skip enrichment activities. They're really fun, they're great, but they're not essential. And getting those core math lessons in is much more important. And then lastly, I'm getting a lot of questions about sixth grade at this point in the year. Questions like, is sixth grade really the last level in math with confidence? When will it come out? What do you recommend after sixth grade? So first of all, sixth grade Math with Confidence will be out next June. I've pilot tested it this past year, and I'm currently working on revising it and getting it ready for publication for next year. So I'm really looking forward to completing the series and digging into all the wonderful pilot test feedback that I got. And yes, it really will be the last level in Math with Confidence. My expertise is really in elementary math. I'm looking forward to exploring more ways to enrich the program. I've gotten a lot of great suggestions from all of you who use it. And so I'm getting kind of excited about thinking about other things I can create to go with the program. But I won't be extending it beyond sixth grade. It will be the last level. And I've been writing a lot for the last 8 years. I'm kind of ready for just to have a little bit of a break. So kids after sixth grade, kids will be ready for pre-algebra or seventh grade math, depending on what series you use after that. Sometimes it's labeled different ways. And I know a lot of people have been asking for recommendations for what to use after sixth grade. I know people take my recommendations seriously, so I want to make sure that I really do my homework before I offer those. So I'm not able to offer any recommendations for beyond sixth grade at this point, and I will have recommendations coming out later this year. If you want to know about those, make sure that you are subscribed to my newsletter. The link to my website will be in the handouts after this presentation. And I also recommend going to the Facebook group to talk about it with parents who have already gotten to that point. There's been a lot of good conversation about what to use after sixth grade. And so you can hear about other people's experiences with other programs. Okay. And let's see, we only have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of zoom through the top 10 tips for teaching math, and then we'll get to the Q&A. And these will also be in the handout that you can download after the workshop. So first of all, avoid the curriculum overcomplication danger zone. It's going to be very tempting at this point in this summer to want to buy all the things or to see, ooh, like I like both of these programs, so maybe I'll combine them, or I'll add this supplement on Mondays and this supplement on Fridays. I highly recommend starting the year with one curriculum and just teaching it to your very utmost, putting all your energy into just teaching that one curriculum well, whether it's Math with Confidence or a different one. Adding more stuff just means that you spend a lot more time thinking about scheduling and planning rather than actually teaching, and that's not generally productive. If you get to October and decide that you want to supplement, that's great. Go buy the books then. But first, I recommend starting the year with just one thing, keeping it simple, teaching it well. Two, plan a consistent math time at least 4 days per week. If you teach math 4 days per week, We will get through all of fifth grade math with confidence in 36 weeks. If you skip the enrichment lessons, you'll get through all of it in 32 weeks if you teach 4 days per week. And the other reason to plan for math consistently is that kids forget less and they stay more in the groove with math if you just keep it going. It gets a lot harder to restart if you stop for a while. And especially in fifth grade, there's a lot of skills that they are keeping in their heads. And so you want to make sure they get that constant practice and review and that consistency in their lessons. If at all possible, quickly preview the lesson the day before. You don't even have to read the whole thing word for word. Just giving it a quick skim as you're cleaning up from the previous day can really help you know kind of the general direction you're heading and what points you'll want to emphasize. Some people use a highlighter just to kind of highlight the key things they want to say, but even a quick preview will help make the next day go more smoothly. 4, don't just hand your child the workbook. Like I talked about earlier, the instructor guide's a key part of the program. If when kids just zoom ahead with the workbook, they might be completing problems for now, but often they're missing important points that will hurt them down the road. 5th, you are the teacher, not the curriculum. I write the books to the very best of my ability based on input from 150 pilot test families. But I don't see your actual kid in front of me. If I saw your kid in front of me, I might adjust some of the questions. I might adjust some of the ways that I teach based on how your child learns. And you know your child, you are your child's teacher. And so please feel free and feel empowered to do the same in your home. If there's an activity that's not really working for your kid, think about how you can tweak it. If your kid seems to really, really understand this, don't do all the practice problems. You are the teacher for your child, and you know your child best and what your child needs. If there's tears or frustration, take a break. Kids can especially start to get a little hormonal as they get into fifth and sixth grade. There can be up days and down days. And often, once a kid has dug in that they're frustrated with something or they just, I don't understand this, often it's not productive to keep insisting on trying to move forward. This is within reason. You, of course, don't want your child to be deciding when they get to do that. But generally, if emotions run high, it's best to just take a break and start fresh later in the day or the next day. And expect the occasional bad day or week, especially in November and February. And I say this mostly because I sometimes see a lot of homeschool parents kind of questioning their choices during these seasons. Like, oh, I don't know if I picked the right curriculum, or I'm not sure if I should be doing this, or, there's so many ways to doubt yourself. And it's really human that there's going to be bad days. If your kids went to school, they would have bad days there sometimes too. And so, we're always thinking about what's best for our kids, but just don't let it one, occasional bad day get you down or make you feel like you need to change everything you've ever decided, because that's just truly not the case. 8, keep the end in mind and don't worry if your child isn't on grade level. This really becomes increasingly important as you get into these upper elementary grades. When I say keep the end in mind, I mean to think about what your goals are for your child. If your goal is for your child to get a high school degree and complete enough math classes to be able to go to a 2 or 4 year college, then what your end is that your child needs to fulfill the graduation requirements for your state. And you might want to look ahead at college, college stuff, but that's really not, you really don't even need to do that. You need to just think about, oh, for most states, kids need to get through Algebra 2 to graduate from high school. To do that, you can start pre-algebra anywhere from 7th grade to 9th grade. There's a lot of mush in middle school math, and kids take a lot of paths between kind of finishing 6th grade math and then getting to pre-algebra. Kids who finish math with confidence will be ready to go straight from 6th grade to pre-algebra. So if your child doesn't finish 6th grade math right in 6th grade, that's okay. There's plenty of time there to finish that up. So that's what I mean when I say don't worry if your child isn't on grade level. There's a lot of time here to complete a full college prep, high school graduation math curriculum. And if they're finishing 6th grade math in 7th grade, they're going to be just fine. Model a growth mindset in math for your child. So really praise your child not for being smart or being mathy, but for working hard, for seeking to grow, for seeking to learn and to understand. Praise the effort, not the outcome. because that's what really matters in helping kids see that they can learn math, that they can be successful in math. When they feel like it's a matter of either I'm good at math or I'm not, kids often don't feel very motivated to work very hard. And even smart kids, kids who are doing well in math, they can really get freaked out when all of a sudden the math gets a little bit harder here in fifth and sixth grade. They worry that if they have to work harder, that it means that they're not good at math anymore. So focus instead on working hard and helping your child understand the math, not how quickly they do it or whether they're mathy or not. And last, cultivate a growth mindset in math for yourself. Math may have not been your best subject. It may have been your worst subject. You may have hated it. You may have loved it. But for if you really don't feel great about your own math abilities and feel like you did not get a great math education, did not learn math well, that doesn't mean that you're not capable of it. Many people just did not receive a great math education and are just pleasantly surprised to realize how much they can learn still in math. That's been a wonderful, fun part of pilot testing is to hear moms saying things like, I just never understood fraction division before. I totally get it now. Like this, I had such an aha moment when I was teaching decimals last week. So I hope that you will also cultivate a growth mindset for yourself, that you too are capable of growing in math, that it's not about what your innate skills are, but about your willingness to learn. You are doing this very difficult, challenging thing of educating your kids at home. You are coordinating a million things. Here you are on a workshop learning so that you can be the best math teacher you can be. And if you're willing to do all those things, you are fully capable of understanding fifth grade math. I truly believe that. And so I hope you'll go into it this year, even if there's topics that are tricky, that you'll go into it thinking, I can figure this out. I can. All right, so that's the end of my top 10 tips. The links to the handouts and the recording will be in your email either sometime tonight or by the end of the day tomorrow. If you're watching the recording, look for the link to the handouts in the YouTube description. And then also just wanted, if you haven't had a chance to buy your books yet, just want to let you know that my publisher, Well Trained Mind, is holding their final summer sale and they just decided to extend it until Monday. So Monday, August 18th will be the last day of the sale. And because fifth grade is a new book for them this year, they're offering 25% off of the PDF and 20% off of the physical book. So it's a great time to go over there and get a copy of that book. All right, so I'm going to stop my screen sharing here a second and go to the Q&A. So please feel free to put questions in here if you have them. I see that Donna's been answering questions as we've been going. That is great. So Laura asked, I missed the first and second grade presentation. Will I be able to go watch that somehow? Yes. I was just putting together an email with links to all levels of this workshop as well as the handouts. And so look for that in your email tomorrow and you'll be able to watch any of the grade levels that you missed. Elizabeth said, I had read that you didn't use PEMDAS, but some others saying that excludes exponents. Can you please explain why? Oh, great question. So in fifth grade, your child will learn how to use order of operations, including parentheses. And then in sixth grade, your child will learn how to add exponents to the order of operations. So when I wrote the fifth grade book, I didn't want to confuse kids by including exponents when they didn't understand them. So what I did is I came up with my own saying for the order of operations. And it is pass my dog a sandwich. So PMDAS, parentheses, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Then in sixth grade, we add the name of the dog to it so we can get the exponents in there. Pass Eddie, my dog, a sandwich. It seems like people don't really like it, which is perfectly fine. It's if you want to use PEMDAS and just tell your kid that the E is coming next year, if you want to say, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, it's really fine. What matters most is that kids just memorize that list in order, the parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, and that they're able to apply it to problems. Kathy asked, any advice for a student with dyscalculia going through your curriculum? So I've tried to include as much what do I want to say? By making it incremental, by making it visual, concrete, hands-on, those are really key features for kids with dyscalculia. And what's most important is that you just make sure to take advantage of all of them. So in fifth grade, you might sometimes see manipulatives being listed as optional. Definitely bring those in. I'd also recommend making sure you focus on quality over quantity, so that your child really focuses on understanding the concepts. And so if you only have time to work through a few problems rather than the whole page of them, that's okay. So that your child doesn't feel overwhelmed by the number of problems, but can really work on just a few under his or her control and feel successful with doing them. It also might sometimes take you more than a year to do a level of math with confidence if you need to work through it more slowly, and that's okay. Like I said before, it's okay if kids are, a little bit behind grade level because there is all that mush in the middle school levels. Having a strong foundation in this elementary math will just make a huge difference when they do get to pre-algebra and algebra. Um, we're finished. Mia says, we're finishing fourth now after taking the summer off. And the whole year, my kid wanted to use mental math instead of the algorithm, but isn't always accurate. How do I respond with saying, just do it the way I'm telling you for the love of everything? I've been letting him work it mentally, then we do the algorithm, and he will see his mistake, but lessons can take forever. He's also got dyslexia, cannot do the practice and review pages independently. So math for this one takes a long time, and I've got 3 kids to teach. Oh, Mia, that's a good question. So if I think if I were in your situation, I would revert to Kate Snow as the authority and say, when she writes them vertically, she means for you to use the algorithm. When she writes them horizontally, she means for you to use mental math and to truly insist on that. Because, I love what you're doing, the way you're accommodating, like that you're, allowing him to try it his own way. But you do have a lot to do. And so if you just want to use my authority and say, vertical means algorithm, go for it. The other thing that I would say is that if you're spending this much time on individual problems, do fewer. You might not need to do quite so many, and it will save you a lot of time in the long run. It really is okay to sometimes just say, yeah, just do it the way I'm telling you. Um, and when we can do that without yelling, Jewish is doing a great job. There's plenty of things that can be frustrating about teaching kids math, and so I applaud just, your effort to not do that, and to honor kind of the different ways he wants to solve it. But it is okay to just say, we're doing this one with the algorithm today. Go for it, buddy. All right. Any other questions here? Well, I see that we are over time, so I want to make sure to respect your time. Oh, I'll give you one more. Let's see, one more. Amber said, "Oh, my son's faster at mental math than me. He gets very frustrated with showing his work and waiting for me to catch up." Um, yes, and I try to tell him that eventually he will reduce his mental load if he just wants to write his work down. It's really true. There's a lot of kids who just are like, "Why do I have to show my work?" I just totally understand the answer, whether they do or not. And it's okay to insist on it because it will matter. They will get to a point where they cannot do the work mentally. Just wait till they get to 3 digit times 3 digit this year. That will not all happen mentally. And so to insist on some, it's worth fighting the battle to make sure that they do show their work because it is a skill that will pay off down the road. Um, and Mia said, "Oh, I'd love a summer program to bridge as you have your free time soon." Don't worry, Mia, that's on the list. I think that'd be a fun one to put together. So I can't promise when, but it's definitely on the list. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful year with your fifth grader and a great year of teaching math. Happy math.